Evidence Not Seen, Darlene Deibler Rose. Starting for the kitchen, I almost stepped on the newest member of our family, a little Kapuka boy. He was juggling live coals and grinned at me, saying he was going to start my fire. After a kettle of water was set over the flames, Imopea informed me that his mother was dead and he was my boy. I was willing. I couldn't resist his grin. Scarcely were our trail tins stacked in the go-down before our official welcome to Inaratoli from the local people was celebrated. Part of our responsibilities as pioneer missionaries was making contact with other villagers living among the rivers that flowed into the Whistle Lakes. We traveled the waterways in our Dayak canoe, moving from one village to another, some of which Russell had visited before, until we reached the outermost Kapuka villages east of the lakes. One evening, Russell connected our 12-volt battery-powered radio, then switched it on to catch the BBC London news. We learned over the radio, not wanting to believe the shocking news, that the Nazis were invading Holland. Russell ran down to the government post. They, too, had heard the news only hours earlier. Our thoughts and prayers turned to our dear friends in Holland, and to that tiny country pitted against a monstrous war machine, Nazi Germany. It was the 10th of May, 1940, my 23rd birthday. In just 5 days, Holland fell. It had been infiltrated, betrayed by the enemy within. This meant dire days for those in Holland, austerity abroad, a tightening of the belt, a determination to endure until the motherland was free of the tyrant. In some areas, it spelled retrenchment. The royal family had safely reached London, and Queen Wilhelmina spoke courage into the hearts of her loyal subjects in the colonies. With German U-boats and submarines operating in the Indian Ocean, the Java Sea, the Makassar Straits, the long arm of the conflict in Europe was beginning to be felt in our peaceful islands. Many times during each day, I would find myself saying, "Thank you, Lord, it's so wonderful to be here." We were striving for mastery of the language so that we could leave believers behind to encourage and comfort one another. The people, with the help and supervision of the teachers, constructed a building that weekdays served as schoolhouse and Sundays as a church building. Both Patapelhojai and Saragai were good teachers, instructing their pupils in speaking, reading, and writing Indonesian, plus basic arithmetic. Sunday services were all attended, both by people and by flies. Each churchgoer arrived with his or her private swarm. One Sunday, the flies were more pestiferous than usual. Degamo, the village bad guy, was sitting well up front, swatting flies to the right, to the left, to the rear. Finally, in desperation, he jumped up and, pointing a grubby finger at the preacher, Mr. Post, demanded, "Do you have flies in heaven?" The preacher had never had that theological conundrum thrown at him before. He couldn't think of an appropriate chapter and verse. Receiving only shocked silence as his reply, Degamo said in disgust, "Well, if you do, I don't want to go there," and stomped out. Daily in the afternoon, with our picture roll, we visited from house to house, sharing and witnessing. I recall vividly one wizened little old lady who prayed with me regularly for others after she came to know the Lord. Her skin was wrinkled and gray with the ashes and dirt of her many years. Her hair had been rubbed off where the handle of her net had rested during the long days of her life from young womanhood to old age. Her teeth were still firm, as were those of most Kapukas. Her eyesight was dimming, but to me she was beautiful. Always I was welcomed with an ear-to-ear, toothy smile, a sweet potato, and often crayfish, which she had roasted on the coals of the fire. After a time of prayer, we shared the repast. She peeled and blew my sweet potato. This I ate while she made ready the crawfish. Knowing that I didn't particularly care for the bitter flavor of the yellow liverish substance left on the tail after the head was broken off, she sucked it off before handing the tail to me to shuck and eat. With her long thumbnails, she was well equipped to dig the goodies out of the shell, so she always kept the heads from my apportioned number of crawfish as well as her own. If I had gone alone to the village, either my elderly friend or Adentori's youngest wife and sister-in-law escorted me home. Outposts that were remote or yielded little to advance the war effort were being closed. All too soon the word came, Anarotoli must be abandoned. We begged permission to stay, but without police protection it could not be allowed. All police were to be posted to Ambon, and the services of the government steamer would be discontinued. The government would be held responsible for our safety, especially because women were involved. This I could appreciate, but it was so grievous to be wrenched from our home and our people. How I needed the Lord's words for courage and comfort. I know the thoughts that I think toward you, thoughts of peace and not of evil. Jeremiah 29:11. We started packing, but every free moment was spent with the people. We tried to explain that our chieftain had said we had to leave. Identori just knew we should have gotten rid of that chieftain with the bad stomach. On the morning that the governor radioed Dr. Deibler that on a certain date the Albatross, the government steamer, would call at Oeda to pick up all personnel from Anarotoli, we knew that immediate evacuation was imperative. Dr. Deibler, no less grieved than we, drew up the plan. He and a party of police would go first to attend to the procuring of canoes from Oeda. The mission party would be followed by the remaining police and coastal prisoners in two contingents. The police commandant with the last group would carry out the government radio and generator. When we said goodbye to Dr. Deibler, he teasingly said to me, "If you make it to the base camp in 5 days, I'll kill all the goats and we'll have satay kambung, goat shish kebabs." Taking the challenge, I laughed and said, "You're on." Coming up from the go-down with our trail clothes and boots, I saw Imopeo, my faithful bearer of hot coals, sitting on our porch with several young friends. Someone had given Imopeo an old straw hat. He was never without it. He and I were both terribly distressed at our imminent departure. He was my boy. I had become his mother. I wanted so much to know before we left that he understood why we had come to live among his people. As meticulously as I could, I explained about God's love. "Oh, Imopeo, do you understand?" He had been staring at his hands. Suddenly he looked up, understanding showing in his big brown eyes. "Yes, Mama, I have listened. Jetoti, Jesus, died for me." We bowed our heads while Impeo prayed and God heard. When we left the next day, Impeo accompanied us over the first mountain range. Finally, I sadly said, "Impeo, you must turn around and go back now." I held his hand in a tight clasp. I could say no more. Tears were too near the surface. He stopped, and I walked on down into the valley. When I turned, there he was, standing on the mountainside. I saw the old straw hat and a little boy, so alone, silhouetted against the afternoon sky. I could tell he was crying. Feeling that he was too old to cry, he wiped his face with an angry gesture, then brushed the tears off on his hip. Finally he called, "Mama, Iga, Kida," return quickly. The wind reaching up from the valley carried my answer. "Imopeo, Kaja Tau," remain in peace. As soon as we can, we will return. At the bend of the trail, I looked back. Imopeo was gone. Sitting down, I wept for my boy, my son in the faith. Dear God, please take care of him until I come back. I little realized that it would be 9 years in a war away before I'd see him again. My trail boots, being constantly wet, came apart at the seams, so the last 2 days I had them tied to my feet with rattan. Nevertheless, I made it to Orawaha in 4 days. True to his word, Dr. Deibler killed the goats, and we all enjoyed goat shish kebabs. Waiting in Oeda for the rest of the government party to arrive, we went on a spending spree, buying lukewarm orange crush. On the appointed day, the Albatross arrived, transporting us to Ambon. German U-boats and submarines had been reported in East Indies waters. A strict blackout was observed as we shipped from Ambon to Makassar. Frequent lifeboat drills were constant reminders that the conflict in Europe had now engulfed our peaceful island.